Hey, everybody. We want to welcome you to Detroit Nerdy Book Club. This is, what is today? It's April 17th, 2021. And this month we're discussing Mr. Miracle by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. This is a book that was published in individual issues, I think 12 of them, a few years ago, and collected in graphic novel format. We'd like to go around the circle, introduce yourself, and then give a rating between 1 and 10, and then maybe just a touch of something that you like or would like to say about the book. So, oh, there's Lisa.
Hey.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
So starting us out with the round table is Jeff.
Oh, I'm starting. Well, I would say this is awesome. It's beautiful. It's fascinating. It's right up my alley. I give it I don't know whether I give it. I'm not going full out giving it a 10, but I'll give it like an 8.5 with room to grow.
All right, and after you give your rating and make your comment, if you could select the next person to.
The top left in my screen is Jolie.
Okay. Hello. This is Jolie speaking. Okay. I too am super impressed with this book. I did you read Vision for this club?
We did.
You
We
read it
did.
for the. Oh yeah, yes,
Yes.
you did. Yeah. So all 3 clubs that I'm in, we read Vision. And then the other club that I'm in also read Mr. Miracle, but like ages ago. So I like barely remember. And now I'm convinced that I probably didn't finish it for the other one because a lot of surprises happen at the end. I love this book. I think it's even better than Vision. But I think it's just the themes are a little more, I enjoyed the themes. I really enjoyed the art. That was a surprise. The artist is one of those people that like uses something that I hate that other artists use, which we can talk about later. But I will give this an 8 with maybe room to grow. In my top left is Patrick.
I will give it an 8.5. I really, really, really love this book. And then we'll talk more about it later. And I'm gonna pick on Lucy.
Geez. I am just here because I want to listen to what people have to say. I tried to start reading this book, and like the fact that it starts with a suicide attempt was way too heavy for me right now. So that really slowed me down. So let's go with Michael and see what his thoughts are. So yeah, I'm just here to listen, be nosy, and see what other people think.
Hi,
Michael.
hi. I give it Michael here. I give it an 8.5 as well. I don't think it's as good as Vision because I feel like, for one thing, I understood Vision more so. This book, I fully admit there's things I did not understand, and after reading about it, because this is my second time reading it, after reading about it, I feel like there was way more going on than I was grasping. But assuming it's all good, it can definitely go higher than 8.5. But what is there is an 8.5. I love the artwork. I absolutely love the colors. I love the continuity, the references to Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, Oberon or Baron, however you pronounce his name. All, the Jack Kirby stuff. I love, what's his name? Funky Flashman, the Stan Lee parody. And I love the twist ending that comes at the end of number 11, which just blew me away when I was buying this when it came out. So I don't know what else to say about it. I thought it was great. And that's it. And let's see, who hasn't gone? Oliver, have you gone?
I have not gone.
Okay, Oliver, you're next.
Awesome. I enjoyed it. I think so. This is the second Tom King book that I've read after the Vision, obviously, and I definitely noticed some kind of like recurring stylistic elements, like the surrealism, the kind of juxtaposition between the fantastical and the mundane. I think it maybe worked a little better in Vision, but I'm ready to be convinced otherwise. So I think for now, I'm going to give it an 8. But we'll see. Alex.
I will also give it an 8.5. I loved the writing and I love the artwork and just the overall story, and yeah, I really loved it. Keith?
I think we read this for Vault of Midnight's book club, but I didn't go to that one, so I didn't read it then. Yeah, I read most of it, but like couldn't go to the book club that week. Yeah, like rereading it, I forgot that it opened with the suicide, even because like the story goes all sorts of places. And I sent to Lucy like a history of Jack Kirby's Fourth World, because like a lot of this stuff, like Metron and Bug and all these other characters, are just like these really deep, or references I didn't get the first time. That's for sure. So yeah, like I like that it's there's a lot of comics history in this, and but it also, there's like an examination of comics history in it as well. So yeah, I liked it. I'm glad we got a chance to read it for this club. Lisa, did you go?
Okay. Did you give it a number, Keith?
Oh, 8.
8. Okay. I will give it a 7. And what I loved about it was I thought it was really funny. Like a lot of it was very, very funny. I didn't get a lot of things. That could just be my lack of comic book reading, but I liked it a lot. So Michael, I think you're next.
I would give it an 8. I really enjoyed it. It's probably one of the only books in the last few years that I've actually read twice, once right after another. I just found it was the depth of the storytelling and how it worked on so many different levels. And the ambiguity of it I found really appealing, and I usually don't respond to ambiguous work. The artwork I thought was very expressive. Even with, Jolie, when he repeats the panels, sometimes he just like turns up the mouth in the second panel compared to the first panel. And I thought that was a really effective use of the artwork. So I would give it an 8. So anybody want to jump in and just start with a conversation? We had lots of discussion questions, but we don't necessarily need to go through those if people have things they want to talk about right away.
Your discussion questions are great.
I want to get to the discussion questions. I feel like
all right then.
They would cover like anything that we wanted to.
All right.
Right.
Well, the very first one is, well, how did you find the book? Was it easy or difficult to get into? What was your emotional response to the story?
I'll go first. Okay. Okay. So I remember this being super difficult to get into the first time I tried to read it, and it was still super difficult to get into the second time. But that's because I think, like, I always go into books like this assuming that there's going to be a lot of history that I'm unaware of, and there is. So I found it difficult to read, but I didn't find it difficult to get into. Emotionally, I feel very attached to this book, like in a weird way. Like no matter what kind of relationship you like, this book, I feel like there's a lot of relationship themes in it. So no matter what kind of relationships you've experienced, I was able to sort of see myself, not see myself, like relate to their kind of trauma, except for the whole like we are gods thing. Like I'm not a god, so that I couldn't relate to, but you know, just having to do one thing while having to do another thing that you really want to do, like raise a family or be with your family. Yeah, I can relate to that. So that's my take.
Cool.
I guess I'll go. There was, you know, I've read a lot of comics. I know some of the history, but I still was a little bit confused by a lot of it. And I guess we can talk about the artwork and the storytelling later. But I don't know. Like, I really did like the panels, the repeating panels, and all that. But I wonder if I guess when I say that I didn't understand all of it, I wonder if all of it was 100% necessary. Like, for example, there was a scene near in one of the last few issues where they were fighting, and as they were fighting, they were kind of having a funny conversation. I think it was about dinner, and I thought it was funny, but I just wonder how much of that is just Tom King kind of being clever and being funny, and how much of it is relevant to like the theme. Maybe it is. Maybe I just missed it, but in that respect, I didn't think it was perfect, but I think the thing is that I like the way that it kind of reimagined everything in the fourth world, because I feel like the fourth world is this. I think the fourth world is the Dune of superhero concepts, in that Dune has never been adapted properly. You know, there was the movie that bombed, there was a miniseries that was boring, and now they're trying to do it again. And that's what the fourth world is. Like every couple of years, someone tries to do the fourth world, and they usually screw up. And I feel like it's just this amazing concept that no one can quite get right. Even Kirby never got to finish it, so no one knows quite what to do with it. But I really like the idea of how they try to resolve the war by giving up the baby, and then the double cross and the blah blah blah, and you know, all that stuff. So I thought it was very cool, and I also like the fact that they didn't make any attempt to update their costumes. Like they practically look like they were cosplayers, like sitting around, you know, just in their full 1971 full color costumes. You know, I thought that was great. So I don't know. Again, it's like I feel like I've read it like 3 times. I have to read it again just to get everything. But I did really enjoy it. You know. And again, if for people that haven't read any of the old comics, I couldn't even. I don't know. Like there was a lot to digest there, and it helped having read the old comics. So I couldn't even imagine not having read the old comics. So.
What have they tried to make into a TV show and movie? And
Oh, Dune.
oh,
D-U-N-E.
Dune. Sorry,
I
yeah,
missed.
yeah,
sorry, I
yeah.
missed
That's why I
that.
said the fourth world is like the Dune of superhero comics. Yeah, because they keep
What-
trying to make it, but never.
What is the fourth? What is the fourth world?
Oh, sorry.
It's part of the New Gods, Mr. Miracle.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, yeah. So
Saga.
right, the fourth world is Mr. Miracle, the New Gods, the Forever People, and then Jimmy Olsen. Like Jack Kirby took over all 4 of those books at once, and he weaved this huge story for like a year, and then it all got canceled. So all these half-finished ideas were kind of left sitting, and everyone's tried to like pick it up since then, but no one really knows what to do with it. So
years ago.
I think even without having any previous knowledge of these characters, the themes in this book are so incredibly strong. The theme of family overlaying the theme of work and the theme of trauma. It's just, and that's where the funniness comes, I think, with those scenes that you're talking about, Mike. It's just like they're juxtaposing like a mundane family discussion in the midst of this very dramatic action sequence with a lot of violence. It's just, there's such a contrast there. It just comes off as really funny.
Tom King does this thing. I've noticed he did this in the Vision, and he's doing this in this book, where he like, I'm not quite sure if I can even articulate this correctly, but he like takes, he almost like specializes in taking like high stakes sort of scenarios and making them almost low stakes. Like he takes these sort of, you know, larger than life characters, and he places them in these very sort of mundane environments, and they have to deal with these very mundane problems. And it's almost like he deliberately tries to avoid making it epic, if that makes sense. It's like he's trying to focus on this like almost micro scale rather than kind of.
Well, I agree with Oliver, but I want to call it something else because mundane makes it sound more, well, mundane.
Well,
Oh,
I think that it's
But like it I
appropriate.
think he makes it, and as I think it also sounds like a cliche. Like he makes it more human, I guess.
when I say
Like
mundane, I don't mean it in a bad way. Just to be
okay,
clear,
okay, okay,
not saying it's bad.
okay. And I
We have,
think
yeah,
he invested with a lot of like emotional core
Yes,
that
I agree.
isn't there when you just get like what I like to call the source booking approach to comic books, where you get like, here's an endless explanation of who this character is, and they're fighting this big war, and look, another splash page. Ah, like, but instead he takes this approach of like, gives it this really rich emotional core, which to me is more interesting. And I'm going to say something blasphemous, like, I don't know a lot about the fourth world, and quite frankly, he just gives me the bite-sized pieces at the start of it, and that's all I needed. And we're off to the races, and everything's great.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of like boils it down to like
Like a little
these
bit, yes,
core
like a
emotional
distilled
concepts. Like
concepts, yes.
you don't need to know the lore, but you need to know that like these characters have
This,
some serious daddy issues.
indeed.
But it's such on such a human scale. I mean, I can't recall any other superhero book that I've read where like the characters go and they need to take a pee. I mean, where do you see that? Just
Right.
taking a pee, talking while they're peeing.
I
But
feel like
you still get the epicness of it, but I love that how it's played for like contrast, and also it's just portrayed in such a ridiculous way, because if you think about it, it really is ridiculous to have like, we have like these thousands of armies and they're just battling each other all day long, right? And I really appreciate the sort of tone and level that he engages that stuff, because like Lisa said, it's just hilarious. Like,
Yeah.
but it's a dark kind of humor, which I absolutely appreciate.
And he
well, super dark.
lowers.
There's that
Sorry.
one place. There's that one time when I don't know the names of the characters. The bug
Mhm.
Bug.
forger.
Oh,
I think it might be forger when he comes and says like 6 million of my people have died fighting this war for Orion, and it's like it's hypothetically like it is epic. It is like the story. It's like Lord of the Rings epicness, good versus evil. But the conversation is happening in Scott Free's living room on the couch. Like they're sitting there in, like Mike says, in full costume, in Jack Kirby costume, but in like the least Jack Kirby setting. Like they're just like, it's sort of like when he's being tried and they keep going to like, she's like, we should probably go get a vegetable tray. And then it keeps coming back to the vegetable tray and they're eating, they're like, I need to get a carrot.
Yeah.
And it's just like this like
Yeah.
sort of tension, like really, really funny tension between like death, war, destruction.
Well, I think
And-
Tom King, he kind of like in a lot of these like battle scenes that come up, he kind of is doing this thing where it's like he's showing this like enormous, just like grotesque amount of like death and suffering, but he does this thing where, and I have no idea if this is influenced by the time he spent in the military or if it's not. I have no idea. I don't know the guy. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but like he kind of is doing this thing where it's like the characters can never quite like fully like psychologically comprehend just the absolute scale of this thing. So it's something that they never quite fully are able to like speak to or address or recognize. It's something that's always just kind of like hovering around like the edges of their awareness, and they don't really look at it because they don't want to look at it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does with those 9-panel grids. It's like the only perspective the character has is that little tiny square. They don't see all the things going on around them, just what's right there in that little square. It's very constricted. I've read that Tom King considered that 9-panel grid as kind of like Mr. Miracle's inside of a jail. He's trapped, he's constricted. He's always trying to like escape. That's his deal. It's just so effective the way he's constructed this.
But I kind of took the opposite view of Oliver, where it's not so much that they can't comprehend it, but I think like for Mr. Miracle and Big Barda and all the new gods, it's sort of like this is just a 9 to 5, right? So it doesn't take on that level of epic importance as it would for like you and me, because to them it's like it's just life. I wake up, I do this thing, and then I teleport back to my condo and I have to raise a baby, right? So it's like, so he doesn't depict it in that splash pagey way, because for them it's just like, it's just like Oliver said, mundane is like getting up in the morning and sitting your butt in front of a computer and typing emails. Except, they go to war and there's like slaughter and carnage.
Yeah, there's like the panel where he has Lightbringer just use his powers to dig a huge trench so that they can throw in all the bodies of their own soldiers because it's take too many resources to take them back home. And then like that's it. And then the next page they move on and they're talking about veggie trays again. And then they also bring a veggie tray for Darkseid, and he's like eating a carrot, but he's also like using his power and ripping out his own eye and being like, with this, I lose the power of the anti-life equation. So,
And
but
I
he's
don't know if
also like eating a carrot.
and I'm not sure it's a good thing for me to like be laughing at that. Like I'm like, is that the right reaction? I don't know. I think so.
He's just trying to give some levity to these serious
Yeah.
situations too. The one thing that kind of really struck me was they're really getting hurt.
Mhm.
You don't, or I mean, I don't have as much experience as you guys, but like a lot of times you see these big battles and, the Flash heals himself in moments, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
these guys, they were really hurt.
Yeah, like when they looked in that magic mirror and they saw what they really looked like. I mean, they were just nothing but like a scars tissue from like top to bottom. That was so revealing. But at the same time, where they look so tortured and ugly, Scott and Barda just like love each other. I mean, that was just so poignant to me. That scene where they like see each other as they really are, just nothing but a mass of scars, but they still want to take care of each other and nurture each other. That's amazing.
That was Granny Goodness's evil mirror, so I don't know how much it is to be trusted.
Oh, okay.
Or
He did use it to shave at the very end of the book, I
Yeah.
noticed.
Yeah, she's there.
And he looked
hectoring
just
him.
perfectly fine then, so.
Yeah. But yeah, she's there hectoring him about like using this all-powerful mirror, not all-powerful, but like incredibly powerful mirror to shave Ed. Like she's like come back from the dead, is like, what are you using this mirror from?
So what do you guys think about the book as far as like whether it was primarily a plot-driven story or it was a character development story? What do you think there?
in my non-English major capacity, I feel like it was a character-driven piece because
I would agree.
there's not a lot of plot, I feel like.
I don't know. I feel like a lot happens. I mean, there is a whole war going on between two planets.
And you've just
that
summed up
gets
the plot.
resolved.
So there you go.
That does get resolved.
I would say-
okay, like, is there a plot to War of the Worlds? It's all in the title, I guess.
But I felt like the characters didn't change much. Like
Right.
Scott Free was,
Really?
Still
Yeah,
mopey at the end.
I mean, I just didn't think that, I mean, what I would consider a normal character arc, I thought Barda and Scott were kind of the same.
Yeah, in fact, they have like at the end, it's like there's you're in hell, you're in heaven, you're in reality. It's like, yeah, it was ambiguous at the beginning, and that's where he is at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, well, which one was it? We followed him all these 12 issues. Where did he end up? yeah, yeah, I agree. I was like,
What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I'm wondering whether I like Lisa's point that like in some ways it doesn't feel quite right to say that it's character driven in as much as like, because I'm not sure whether I necessarily feel like the characters are particularly three-dimensional. Like they're not like, I don't think that they're particularly well developed, and I don't know whether there's necessarily much of a character arc. Like, and yet there's also doesn't necessarily seem to be there's not like a high concept plot. Like, yes, there's a war between these worlds, but that's sort of like happening in the background. Like they'll fly off to war and then he'll come back and be like, man, I gotta go to my job tomorrow. So I don't know. I wonder if there's a third option.
How about a theme driven?
Theme
Seems like
driven,
theme driven to me.
or even like a formal, like I wonder whether it's driven less by the characters or the plot and more by the concept, by the experiment itself.
Mhm.
By like
What do you mean
by the project, like there's like it's a formal, like, I feel like it's like, to me, what kept me, so can I pull this, go back to your first question about, did you find it hard to get into? Because like there's this moment early on that I was thinking about this. You start out with, and I think this is what Patrick was saying about, like, you start out with this little bit of background. And if you look at those pages, it's like the comic book style is really like retro, sort of very clean and almost like juvenile, right? About this background. And it's a really straight narrative. And then on page, and I guess it's page 14, you start like, it's all of them standing around, like Big Barda and Mr. Miracle and Oberon standing there, and then they begin to glitch, right? And then the next page, I think, is the face of Scott in this like totally different style. The close up with the Ben-Day dots and the really like brushy marks, and that's on page something 15. And like, so I think like I'm reading along and I'm like, oh yeah, this is like really breezy and easy summary. And then all of a sudden like that, and then he's like sitting there in the bathroom in this really like grisly shot, having committed suicide. And then you jump to this scene with this page with the kid drawing God.
Mhm.
And I feel like for like a long time at this point, like then you don't know what's going on, everything, like it asks, I think for a lot of people, this would, like, if you were looking for a superhero comic book, I think these pages would be really defeating, because it's really all about that experiment, like disrupting the normal kind of narrative. Like I think he really wants to, like, that glitchiness is like that desire to disrupt narrative. And so I think, like, for me, it's that it's less about plot or character and more about that, like, the experiment of disruption of comics. So and for me, that pulls me in. Like I will buy into those kinds of experiments. I bought into Vision. Another comic that we talked about, that we read, that did it, and I would really lump these three together, is Hawkeye.
Right. Yeah.
And it's also where, like, it's another sort of hero that's sort of a sad sack hero that isn't actually very good. Right? That is overlooked and sort of a secondary character. And in that comic book as well, Hawkeye keeps getting like beat up, like half the time he's like got bandages all over his face, and he's also like going off to do his day job. And there's real similarities, I think, between all of these, including this sort of formal, like there's lots of times when they're like drawing our attention to the comicness, the artifice. Like there's times in this where during the trial where Orion is walking around and you see these like dotted lines following him, showing where he's gone, like, or the page where they're infiltrating the camp to go kill Granny Goodness.
The panels
You
get
see the lines.
smaller as they're being crushed.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff that really like draws our attention to the comicness of the comic.
Jolie, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't remember.
Well,
hi, Jolie.
Raise your hand and we'll do an emergency detour if it comes back.
I also want to point out there was another scene where they're like sneaking in to kill Orion, and that's when Big Barda reveals that she's pregnant. Well, they're like evading all these traps and toxic gases and things like that, and it was like it's so comic-y, but also like just it's kind of the biggest moment I felt in the comic was when she revealed she was pregnant. It was just like the biggest change in the character. I mean, like, they're superheroes and they're always fighting. So that's just like their life. But then, like the biggest thing for Mr. Miracle was not, evading the lasers that would kill him right away. It was how are they going to rearrange their condo?
Yes.
So to accommodate the baby.
I see that, Keith, as kind of like where that character arc occurs. And that at the beginning of the book, I'm reading and I'm going, oh my God, this is like the most passive superhero I've ever come across. He just like sits around, he mopes, he doesn't do anything, he doesn't go anywhere. But it all turns when he finds out he's becoming a father, and when he becomes a father, and the whole hospital scene is absolutely hilarious. With the relatives that come in from out of town, and this is a theme of family that comes in here too, just as an aside, where it's like, I don't know, anybody else here have relatives that kind of like show up at your house and that's kind of like, I don't know what to do with these people, I mean, they're kind of, it's a little awkward,
I've never had any of them say that they were going to use a knife to kill me, but I could borrow it.
Yeah, you can borrow it.
It's so great though. Like it just taps my funny bone in a really good way.
Eventually, I will use this knife to kill you, but you can use it right now if you want. So
give it back.
Yeah.
But I guess to go back to the character-driven question, I think Barda, sure, I think mostly remains static, but I do think there's an arc for Scott, like particularly near the end when like Metron gives him that choice, and also Tom King gives Mitch Gerads a reason to draw this amazing splash page, which he totally did. And so like he's like given the offer to either go to this world or stay in this one, and he makes the choice to stay here, which I think is a nice sort of arc from where you find him in the beginning, where he's trying to escape. So I do think there's some development there. And then from what I mean, I'm not the biggest Mr. Miracle fan, and I don't know how many published titles there are with him, but like I think this is the most development that this character has gotten in like forever. So
yeah, his big thing is he can escape from things. I was like, that's kind of a weird superpower. So
it's a horrible superpower. Like for it to be useful, you have to get caught.
Yeah.
Well, I've gone back and I've started reading the 1970s Mr. Miracle titles by Jack Kirby. And I haven't finished all of them yet, but I've gone through maybe like 7 or 9 of them or something like that. And they all have the same plot. Somebody from his extended family from, Apocalypse or New Genesis, those worlds that are at war, come to Earth. They visit him. He's in the middle of trying to earn a living.
As an escape artist.
As an escape artist, by putting himself into these horrendous, like self-inflicted, horror show type of traps. And there's never any explanation as to how he gets out of the trap. He just does, which I think is like pure genius as an author. It's just like, Jack Kirby didn't know how he did it. Why does he need
Who
to
cares?
explain it?
Right.
Yeah.
And he goes, and I think they even do this one in the book here, where he goes into a box and then they drop the box from a crane, and the box hits the ground and explodes, and Mr. Miracle walks out from somewhere else. I mean, it's just like that, except with Jack Kirby, they're like railway trains running into him, and then miraculously he escapes that. They're like knives and lances on rocket sleds heading straight for him, and he just escapes from that somehow. But basically, that's all these issues are, is just him escaping and dealing with these weird relatives that he has that keep showing up. I haven't seen any character development yet, but I'll let you know if I.
Let me know.
So one thing that I have kind of wondered about, I'm wondering your thoughts on this. So there's kind of this recurring like surreal, sort of glitchiness, and he's kind of in and out of reality, and he's not always sure of what's real and what's not. Is there any kind of like, I don't know, deeper thematic element to that? Because that's something I'm still thinking about.
Yeah, that was one of our discussion questions. It's like, what do you think all that means? Has anybody figured it out, or they have a theory on that?
The glitching?
The glitching, the little.
Well, I assumed it was the fact that he was in this other dimension. Like, and this is, we have to kind of talk about the twist ending of number 11, right? Where you find out that he's not in the DC universe. So where is he, right? Because Metron offers him a chance to go to the DC universe where all the superheroes are, which he isn't in. So I assume all the glitching was showing the fact that either this is a different Mr. Miracle, or this is our Mr. Miracle in this universe, or I don't know what it is, but I think that's what the glitching was relating to. I think. I don't know.
So it's like some warping of the space-time continuum fluxing or something.
Kind of, yeah, like the Matrix. Like, when that expression. There's what do people say about the Matrix? There's a flaw in the Matrix.
There's a glitch in the
There's a
Matrix.
glitch. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I think it's a glitch in the. What were you gonna say, Jeff?
You just glitched while talking about the glitch.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
How appropriate. Yeah, but it's like a glitch in the whatever. I don't know. The other thing is, there's a scene in the book where they talk about what the fourth world means. And the thing is when Kirby came up with the fourth world, that was around the time they came up with the concept of the first world, second world, and third world, which we kind of use today. Usually we just say third world. We don't really talk about first and second world. But when he came up with it, he just thought it sounded cool. But in this book, they try to come up with an explanation for it, right? So maybe that's what it's directly relating to. You guys remember that scene? I'll go ahead, Billy.
It's when his son is or the boy is drawing again.
Right. Which issue is that?
What's that?
What issue is that?
Oh gosh, it's probably.
Can someone just go over that really quick? I don't really.
I'll read it to you. So the boy's drawing again, like he was at the beginning of the story, right? And it says, and the son asked, "What is the fourth world?" And the father said, "The first world is the old world, the world of my parents from which they fled. The second world is the new world, which they sought, which they found, where I came to be. The third world is our world, and it is now in the making, the future being born. And the fourth world, my child, that is my world, the world I see when I close my eyes." That is just so poetic. And when I read that, I thought about my own family and how my grandparents came from the first world, and how my father was born here in the second world, and how I grew up in the third world, as speaking for myself. And the fourth world is when I think about the future. It also kind of like fits where he talks about, near the end of the book, Scott talks about looking back at all of his ancestors and looking forward to his descendants, and how that kind of like gels in with this whole idea. I love that. That is just like, that's way beyond the typical comic book, superhero comic book. I mean, that's like poetic. That's good writing.
Yeah, I kind of took that page as sort of like an immigration story as well, because
Mhm.
I mean that's what Scott and Barda are essentially, right? They
Right.
immigrated to this world from the old world. But to go back to Oliver's questions about the glitchy, I think, and I have no like intellectual or like authorial reasons to be saying this other than me reading the book. Um, it's just sort of like I think it calls attention to like this sense of unrealness, both for Scott and the reader, where they're sort of as the story is like unfolding, like they're questioning the reality. Scott is questioning his reality, and I think the reader is also questioning like, WTF kind of superhero comic is this, right? And I think by the end of it, like you just sort of accept the glitchiness, and so does Scott, right? Because he comes to a place where like as messy or possibly unreal all this is, like I'm just going to accept it. And that's the choice that I make. That's how I'm interpreting that.
Yeah. I think like at some point in the book, I gave up trying to figure out what everything was supposed to mean.
See, I was right. Mike validated my theory. See,
Yeah.
thank you.
Because it's like, I couldn't figure out what the glitches were for.
And
I
it
couldn't
doesn't
figure out, is he
matter.
alive? Is he dead? After a while, though, I just said to myself, it doesn't really matter. I mean, Tom King is like communicating to us and telling us something about what it means to be alive, to cope with depression, to be able to overcome that, how to cope with families, how to cope with an insane work environment. It's just all these things that he had to say without saying them. He kind of like has layers to the story. It's just
Is this a whole treatise about work-life balance, Mike? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
In a
I agree.
nutshell,
That's
Yeah.
another level. Like work-life balance is important, especially
yeah.
right now.
I mean, the glitching seems to only happen visually when it's potentially like what we are supposing maybe the third world or the fourth world is. Like when Grandy Goodness, when he sees her in the mirror, she's all glitchy. And then when he sees parts of his family, maybe it does represent the, the fourth world or things that could potentially change his future. I don't know. But also, like Mike, I stopped caring, like, and just let the book drive as I read.
And some characters are also glitchy. Like certain characters get drawn glitchy, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and they're definitely not part of the human world, or
Hmm.
not what we would assume is part of the human world.
at one point I thought that the glitchiness was like Scott's observation from his point of view as what he was seeing. Like he was looking at something and his reality all of a sudden gets twisted. But there's a few panels in the book, I don't know what page it's on, where the point of view is from Scott's baby son in the
Oh,
crib,
mhm.
looking at Scott as Scott comes to get him. From the baby's point of view, there's the glitchiness. And then I just threw everything out and I'm just going to enjoy the book.
Mm-hmm. They're definitely also like the I think the color is important in to the themes of the book too. If you like, I just noticed a lot of the time where maybe Scott is unsure or he's not with Barda. He seems the palette is less realistic and it's more there's like a lot of textures where it's like either blurry or there's glitchiness or there's like textured overlays as if he like when he's in the grocery store talking to the woman in the grocery store, it's all like a haze. And it's a lot of what I hear people who suffer from PTSD and depression, like just casual interactions, how they describe feeling, like they have earmuffs on and nothing's really real. Sometimes you have whole conversations, but you don't hear anyone talking, and it's like it doesn't matter. It's just that's the the depictions of those kinds of conversations were really realistic. And like even when he's just showering, it's like 9 panels of him showering, and it's as muted as the conversation with the woman in the bakery, like when he's going to buy that Batman cake.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I love it because there's some moments of clarity, real clarity, where he's like in the park with Barda, or he's just like fighting alongside Barda, and they're just in like vivid color, totally clear. The images are sharp. It's almost as if his world, or it's like an explanation that his world with her is what makes him feel better, which is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
Very insightful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, finally we get to talk about art in a different way, and it's exciting.
Well, is what gives him clarity his foil, the Funky Flashman? Is this commentary from Tom King saying that Jack Kirby needed Stan Lee and to give him some? No, I'm reading a lot into it. I'm just making that up.
There, it's kind of self-indulgent, but I'll let Tom King get away with it. It's all right.
Are you talking about the art, Patrick? Like how he did the art, like Jolie was talking about? They got a lot of-
No,
there's
there's like lines and like dialogue where like Tom King is going all meta on us. Like there's that scene where Funky was like, and then we came up with this character with a guy who eats the planets and he seeks out planets to eat for that dude. And it's a little bit like comic minutia. Like Tom King's like winking at us like, I'm a fanboy like you are, see?
Well, yeah, because just for the record, Funky Flashman was Jack Kirby's parody of Stan
Right.
Lee. And so Tom King is playing that up. Like that's why
Mhm.
he's always saying Excelsior and blah blah blah. And
Right.
that whole story Patrick was talking about was Galactus and Silver Surfer, right? So that's and then the son's name is, what is it, Jacob?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the son is supposed to be like Jack Kirby, and Funky Flashman's like Stan Lee. So
I thought there was another depiction of Jack Kirby in this. I can't remember.
maybe.
His,
Yeah, it's
his gravestone, there's his hands and his name, and
Mhm.
in another scene, Jack Kirby shows up a lot.
I think
Yeah, do you know
O'Baron
who
is
else is
supposed to be
in
like
here
Kirby.
too?
Who?
Jim Lee and Dan
Dan
Didio.
Didio,
Didio.
right? I think that scene, that page, those are all DC.
Yeah, those are all staffers, I think.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well,
Tom
some of
King right
them-
there. That's Mitch Gerads, I
Yeah.
believe.
I think, I mean, unless some of these people, I think some of these people are actors, but who knows? Maybe they have written comic books.
Hmm.
A couple of them are, but anyway, maybe to it, maybe where he is reality, like our reality, like Earth.
Oh,
But it's slightly tilted, right? Because there's Batman. Like Batman's a thing. He
I mean,
can
No,
just appear.
No, I
reading-
think Batman is a cartoon in this. Like he's a,
Huh.
you buy like a Batman cake or a Batman T-shirt or whatever. But anyway, Jeff, what were you gonna say?
I'm just wondering. I want to go back to the glitching for a second because I'm trying to. I was. Unfortunately, I wish I had the book. I'm reading this in my, like, from the Royal Oak Library on Hoopla, and it's good, but it's sort of hard to like just
Swipe.
flip through it and see like what's going on. So I was trying to figure out like when, like 'cause it would be interesting to really look and see when it glitches. But here's sort of my question about the glitching. I've been trying to think about how to formulate this. I guess it's like, does it seem like the glitching comes from within Scott or outside of Scott? Like, in other words, is the glitching a glitch in his perception of the world, right? Like, is it something? Is it Scott? Is it Scott's like vision of the world crumbling, or is it like the reality of the world outside of him? So is it internal to him or external to him? Does that make sense? Like as a question? Because
Yes.
I'm wondering, because I feel like 20th century literature, so much is about like not just reality, but about perception of reality,
Well,
right?
My feeling reading the book is that it is his perception.
So you think the
So-
glitching is him?
Yeah, I would agree. It's his perception. Yeah.
Here's a picture of him as he reaches into the crib from the baby's point of view. It's on page 204.
Well, I mean, like going to like an overarching thing about just the plot and all is like, did he die in the first issue? Did he, after dying, did he escape death?
Well, that's
And-
what the question is, like, which Mr. Miracle is that in the first page? Is that the DC Mr. Miracle who then wakes up in this reality, or what is it, right?
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
It's like, I mean, the
Jolie.
like Prime said, it is ambiguous, and it's purposefully ambiguous. Like there is no answer. If there was an answer, we could have found it, but it's however you want to interpret it. But yeah, it's like you can, the glitches never like determine. It's never like absolutely like when you see a glitch, those scenes aren't real. It never goes back and says like, there's no twist at the end where it was like, oh, I mean, like the most we get is when he's talking to Oberon and Big Barda is like, he died weeks ago. But even then, it wasn't like I don't remember Oberon being like super glitchy. So it wasn't like, this is a clue. So it's just, I feel like it's purposefully doesn't answer. I mean, I know there's a lot of scenes where it's like really intensely emotional, and it starts to get more glitchy. But like, that I don't know that it ever like determines like, is this his real life or is this his
Fantasy.
just- yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I was just
essentially.
quoting
So,
Bohemian Rhapsody. Anyway.
yeah, but it was just like I don't know.
Jolie, what do you think?
I was gonna ask if there's like some elephant-shaped copyright thing that we should address. Because Mike said, "Is this the DC Mr. Miracle?" And I was like, "Oh, great! Is this like a Captain Marvel thing?"
What do you mean by that, Julie?
Well, Mike L said, "Is this DC's Mr. Miracle?"
No. What I meant was,
Like,
okay,
was he
so-
owned? I guess what I'm saying is, was he owned by another company? And we're
No, nothing to do with
Okay.
the company. But the twist in number 11 is that Metron shows him that there's another universe with Superman, Batman, and blah blah blah, everyone else. But in previous DC comics, Mr. Miracle was always part of that. He was in the Justice League, and he met all these people, and blah blah blah. But the implication in that twist is that this is not the DC universe. It's another reality where all those people don't exist. It's just Mr. Miracle and the new gods. And so that's why I asked in the first scene when Mr. Miracle commits suicide, what I'm asking is it the Mr. Miracle from the traditional DC universe, or is it Mr. Miracle from this universe?
Like Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3?
Kind of, yeah. But this
Why-
is like
what- So what's writing on that question?
I don't remember. No, I'm only answering what Jolie asked.
No, but I mean, I guess like what will it get us?
Well, I mean, if we're talking
Oh.
about realities, then if we're to like take that as like whether he's like, because there's a question in our discussion notes about whether he's dead or not. So if we assume that he's dead, then we're assuming that this is like some afterlife. If we're assuming that he's not dead, then he survived, and this is just maybe him experiencing other alternate realities.
So there's there's one element of this that I'm a little surprised nobody else has brought up yet, which is the anti-life equation.
Mhm.
And it kind of gets talked about in the middle of the book, and then they kind of stop talking about it. So you do sort of like forget it. But in the middle of the book, there's like that whole kind of big thing where Scott begins to believe that he and his brother Orion are possibly like infected by the anti-life equation, and that it's beginning to like corrupt them, because Orion turns into this like fascist asshole, which for my understanding, and I'm not like a big like DC Comics guy, but my understanding is that's like not how he has previously been portrayed in sort of like the mainline DC books. So like Orion is like turning into this like weird evil asshole, and like Scott is like feeling all kinds of fucked up. So I don't know how that kind of plays into, I don't know, into the wider question of like how real is this reality?
Those are good questions. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Mm,
I think it's
Go
like
ahead.
I think it's both like Tom King being all meta on us, I guess, and like a sort of staking out his terrain as far as, this is the kind of story that I'm telling, and I'm going to tell it in my own terms. And by the time it ends, it's not going to revert back to the kind of sort of typical superhero narrative that you might maybe expecting, is how I'm reading that.
There is another part of the story that kind of relates to the anti-life, where he goes to, I think it's like a party supply store or something like that. And he's talking to the clerk, and he says, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I have to decide whether," he doesn't say it, in so many words, but he has to decide whether he has to give up his son to Darkseid or not. And the clerk says, "Well, it's a simple equation. You just do whatever brings the most happiness to the most number of people." It's like a life equation, the guy said. And then it's just like, oh, well, there's a life equation.
An anti-life equation.
And I personally, my theory is, and I've been reading DC Comics for like 40 years. I've been trying to figure out what is this anti-life equation, because it's constantly brought up in any of these stories with Darkseid and the New Gods and whatever, but they never really spell it out. And I think in this book, it gets closest to describing what it is, in that it's the part of life that drags you down. It's the part of life that destroys you slowly, eats you away, takes away your hope. It's kind of like depression or anxiety that just kind of like eats at you and sucks all the joy and happiness out of life. I think that's what he's saying, because he's also saying, hey, there's an equation for happiness, a life equation that you can, use. And I think that Orion is certainly infected with the anti-life equation. He's always been a jerk. His metamorphosis in this book is pretty standard with how he is represented in most other stories that he's in, where he struggles with trying to be a nice guy, and it always turns out that he's a real jerk. So I think that Scott is infected with the anti-life equation because he's so depressed and he tries to kill himself at the beginning of the story. That's my theory anyways.
So he's manipulated.
He's manipulated by this force of nature that is tearing him down, and he doesn't overcome it until he recognizes that there's something in life that's more meaningful than just himself, and that is his son and his family, and creating a better world for them.
So did Darkseid do that to him? Is he the one?
Could have.
I thought he was the one who controlled that.
Yeah, he understands Darkseid. This is the only story I've ever read also where Darkseid has the anti-life equation. All the other stories, he's trying to get it. He's trying to understand what it is. But in this story, he has it. And I think that Darkseid it shows up all scattered throughout the book, is just shows up whenever there's like this dragging down. It's like that. If there's a dark god, it's Darkseid, right? And he's just kind of like infected these people, and it's bad news.
Oh, maybe then someone said earlier that it had infected the two brothers. I was like, maybe that is right, because maybe that's what the glitch is. Because you see the glitchiness from the point of view of his child as he's exiting the womb and as he's being reached for in the crib. It's like, well, he passed it on genetically if he's been infected. He passed it on to his son, who will also suffer, unfortunately, from it. Maybe that's what the glitchiness is.
Yeah.
Huh.
And you know, at the end of the story, he's like, hey, I get this choice. You could be in hell, you can be in heaven, you can be both. I think that's the other thing that Tom King is saying is like, real life is just like, it's a combination of darkness and light. We don't get away from it. We can't, you know, have a son that's just immune from it. Even our children, our babies have it. I like that glitchiness being associated with anti-life. That's interesting.
That's
You know, and I do like your take that this is a Manichaean, like these are the good gods and these are the evil gods, and Apocalypse is hell world and New Genesis is all gardens. And it's like, no, I mean, you know, we have gardens on Earth and we have hellscapes on Earth. You know, it's like it's a mix. You know, it's like, yeah, it's you know, there will be the pull, the push and the pull between the two sides. Also, yeah.
Although when
Sorry.
when the grocer tells him that though, I was like, no, this utilitarian garbage is anti-life. That is not a life equation. This utilitarian garbage is
Fair
anti-life.
point.
Like, no, it's not.
I was just thinking about the, you know, they say you can't experience joy like all the time. It always has to, you know, it's always in contrast to something else, you know, or that you, like if you had joy all the time, you wouldn't even recognize it as joy anymore because there's nothing to kind of compare it to. So it made me think about like all those scenes where they're fighting and things are awful and all that. And then they're just talking about, you know, like how to rearrange their condo and that they're going to have a baby and that like it really, you know, puts those two contrasts right next to each other, which I just think was brilliant.
Yeah, he's very good at that,
I mean,
Tom King.
I think there's something super interesting about this because like he keeps talking, like he's trying to write a comic book that is rooted in a old like New Gods, a book like a world called the New Gods. So and throughout this is the whole thing is laced with this discussion about God, like the boy who was said he's drawing God. No one knows what he looks like. Now we do, or until now, or whatever he says. And I just went back to this. I think there's like obviously I feel like King is really interested in this idea of like if I'm going to be writing about something called New Gods, I'm going to grapple with what it means to be a god and what it means to talk about God. Like he's not really shying away from that. And I think there's this super interesting moment right in the middle where he's on the beach with Barda and having that conversation about Descartes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is sort of relevant because I totally also thought that the glitch was the anti-life equation, but I wasn't sure what to make of that. But he said like there's this one frame where he's talking about Descartes and he says some things are better than other things, and this is on page 124. He says some things are better than other things, and God is what you'd call the thing that is all the better things. Right? Which is kind of cool, right? Like so it's not like that God is a being, but that God is the better. Like everything is better and worse, and that God is the better of things. So good is better than bad, so God is good. Strong is better than weak, so God is strong. Kind is better than cruel, God is kind. If there are two choices, God is the better choice. He has the better quality. And so like this conversation kind of ends up with him saying, and then he said to exist is better than to not exist, right? Descartes famously said, like, I think, therefore I am. and here it's saying, so God exists, God is, but God is the better half, and dark side is the worse half. Right, and so he's like saying, making this argument here. So then God is, but throughout it's saying dark side is, dark side is, dark side is, which is this sort of like pressing pressure of like, yeah, sure, we can imagine that God exists and that God in the Descartesian sense exists as like the better half of things. But the pressure, the constant pressure in this book is the opposite of that, the worse half, the bad, all the bad stuff, all the bad, everything that is worse. And that might be like, in some ways, like the anti-life equation is the anti-God, the anti-good, the anti, like the lower, the propensity for ill, anything that is worse rather than better.
Yeah.
And, which is part of all of us. Like, and so when we think about superheroes and we think about like, we want to think of superheroes in terms of that like good bad dichotomy, like, right, like we want to be like superheroes are good and supervillains are bad, especially pre-Watchmen superheroes. And here all of a sudden it's like, no, the bad is omnipresent. Like there is no just good and bad. The good guys are infected with anti-life, I don't know, stuff.
Well, that has been book club. That was awesome. Holy crap. I like that I like that a lot. I feel like that's correct. Also, that room to grow that you gave your score, that's where mine grows. Just gonna pinpoint that now.
I'm gonna give another spin on the glitch
Mhm.
because it's interesting. Like the last chapter, like the only glitchy parts are these like fantastical characters he's talking to. So Granny Goodness is glitching, and um, his daddy is glitching, and like all of these fantastical, like Orion is glitching. So like maybe like the glitching is him trying to escape in the previous chapters, and then he finally pulls it off in the last chapter, and then you have all of these sort of baggage from his previous life trying to lure him back in, and he keeps refusing them.
Mhm.
They're all glitchy. Anyway, that's my other theory.
I can dig that. So sort of going back real quick to kind of the theological aspect of it, something I do find interesting is the way that like you have all these gods, but like outside of kind of this discussion he has on the beach, kind of about the deeper like philosophical implications, there's no real mysticism to any of it. You know, the gods are not they're not you know, omnipotent. They're not particularly concerned with sort of the wider machinations and goings on of the universe. You know, there's no sort of, I don't know, like deeper significant, they just kind of exist, they're just kind of there. You know, they sit around and they do things and they fight amongst each other, but there's no sort of majesty or I don't know to it. So I don't know, I thought that was kind of interesting. They're almost, I don't know, there's
Well,
like
it,
a certain mundaneness to the gods themselves.
well, the god label almost feels like an ethnicity. I mean, these are not holy beings. they're
Right.
they're just this group of people called gods.
Well, they have special powers.
Well, okay, yes, but
Yeah.
beyond that, but yeah, it's
But
not
yeah,
like
they're
big
holy.
G God, right? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Greek gods.
Yeah.
right,
Well,
right.
That's what I was
actually,
thinking about when I
Mm.
Mhm.
talked about the gods, not the god or anything like that.
yeah,
There
I
is,
think that
you know, they talk about Scott being the son of God, which makes me think about the parallels in his story of, you know, his father sacrifices him uh, for the peace. That's Scott's story. Scott kind of twists that around and refuses to sacrifice his own son. They make reference to Jesus Christ several times.
including in the most notably page 115, where he is in a Christ-like pose,
Yes.
in a crucified
Hey there.
pose, while
On the
tied up on the bed, completely
Yeah.
naked,
Mm.
which is a very interesting artistic choice, I feel.
Oh, there's also the glitches there. Wonder what that means.
Mm,
He's trying to escape.
trying to escape.
A la
He
Patrick's
is.
theory.
Oh, by the way, speaking of Hawkeye, remember the Hawkeye scene where he was jumping and they used his face over top of his genitalissimo, and then here you see the same thing. That's hilarious. Anyway.
But yeah, actually, one of the origins for this story, or for Jack Kirby, was he did a story where in Thor, where all the gods killed each other, and then the first page of his new story was apparently like essentially recreating that, and so this is he wanted to use that as a springboard, but Stanley wasn't going to pay him for it, so he went to DC and did it. So
Ragnarok, right? Yeah, it was Ragnarok. Yeah.
So it was all the gods have killed themselves, and it has created, essentially ground for new gods to be born.
Mhm.
So that's why they're new gods. But yeah, that's also why they're not the god. It's just all of the mythological gods of the past have now killed themselves. So now it's space for a new history. So that's where the origins. Yeah, like I read this article about like Jack, because they brought it up again because of the Justice League Zack Snyder movie, and it references so much of the characters that Jack Kirby created. It was like, where does this come from? And it was like the Vulture did a history of Jack Kirby and the New Gods, and like a lot of this was contractual disputes. So, and not getting enough credit at Marvel, so that's why he ran off and created this new universe at DC.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, and then also the anti-life equation has meant so many things over the years. I looked that up too, and at one point, Darkseid figures it out and sends it out in like chain emails, and if you read it, you become polluted with it. And I was like, this is awful. So I think that that's something that's changed a lot depending on who's writing it. But yeah, it's like spam emails were enough to get you polluted with the anti-life equation at one point.
Wow. Were there other questions that you guys wanted to make sure that we talked about?
Can we? I feel like, have we talked about the art?
In a roundabout way.
A little bit.
A little bit. How did people feel about it?
I liked it.
I usually don't like art. Yeah, I usually don't like art that repeats as much as this did, only because I suspect that they're just in Photoshop,
Lazy.
like duplicating scenes. But in this book, I did think it was pretty effective. I love the colors, as I said earlier, and I don't know, like I like the fact that they didn't try to hide the fact that these were superheroes dressed in garish 1970s superhero costumes. I love that. Yeah, like I have nothing bad to say about it. I loved it.
I think it strikes for me the perfect balance between realism and sort of this more comic booky aesthetic. Like it's just that sweet spot where like, sort of that Alex Ross type realism, but still retains that very comic booky flavor to it, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, it's not as rigid as
Right.
Alex
Yeah,
Ross.
yeah, for sure.
And
It's so expressive too.
Yes. And I enjoy it way more.
Yes.
I also agree with that comment about the repetition. And when we inevitably talk about other books that will involve repeated panels, I will reference this book again in the context of this one did it better.
What better than what?
Um,
Was it
Yeah,
Alias
Jessica
or
Jones?
Jessica Jones? Yeah.
yeah.
Jessica Jones.
So, like specifically, an artist who does it is Alex Maleev, who is, a good digital artist, but it's kind of lazy.
But I feel like this was not like I feel like this was clearly like this to me did not in any way feel like it was done out of laziness,
Exactly.
but out of because I mean I don't know what the process was here, but I don't get the sense like I feel like we get just as many like the artist is just as willing to give us a 3x3 grid of slightly different drawings where clearly everyone is different. Like this is not Photoshop. Like it like I just turned to randomly to page 66, I think it is. And it's just like 9 panels of Scott in like getting up out of bed. But it could be like there's any number of other ones. Like I don't feel, or on page 74, Mr. Miracle climbing the ladder up onto the crane to like get dropped in the box. Like they're all different. Like each one is created, but I think it's a aesthetic decision to repeat rather than like nothing about this felt lazy.
Exactly.
Right.
It's
right.
intentional. Even if there is repetition, it's intentional. And that's what I'm saying. Like other people use it and it's just born out of laziness.
I would be super interested to if someone could like trace the history of this kind of comic page layout, because when I think about it, you went to Jessica Jones, but like I always go to Louis Riel.
Right.
And who is it's not Seth, it's
Yeah, who was that? I'll look it up.
oh it's I can tell you maybe it's Chester Brown, isn't it?
Right.
It's Chester
like
Brown,
the friend.
yeah. But like because we're on, and I think and so I what I'm curious about, and I'm sure it existed before Louis Riel, but he made it such a big part of that, and it, like where like you just get like the same like really static shots of just like pages of the same panel with like people saying things, and it was clearly this sort of like almost anti-comic alternative comics kind of thing. I feel like you would like I feel like someone like Art Spiegelman or would do stuff like that. It's like it's very different than the sort of cinematic stuff that you get in most comics. Certainly like the opposite of drawing the comics the Marvel way, right?
Well, yeah, like even if you go back to like, well, Watchmen, right? 1985 was doing this, but I think they were purposely trying to recreate the Steve Ditko style of panel design, which he did, which is probably a 1950s thing, right? Of just a grid. But I think it's funny because you said it was anti Jack Kirby, did you say?
No, I said it was anti drawing,
Marvel.
drawing
Yeah.
Marvel comics the Marvel way, where every like
Right.
where like every panel the camera changes.
Right.
With a really dynamic like and like sort of like what is it? Who is it? The 22 comic like.
Oh, the
panel.
24-hour comic?
No, there's a page. It's Wally Wood's 22 panels that you can always use in a comic.
Okay.
But it's like there's like so much of comics is like constantly moving the camera, like looking up, looking down, characters really dynamic, like action and like all this movement and dynamic, and like putting the camera in one place and just having a character sit there is sort of the opposite of action.
Right. You know what? That's an interesting one. Other thing I noticed about this is that if you look at, for example, the Marvel Cinematic Universe that's happening like right now, you know, even like say Falcon and Winter Soldier or whatever, you look at these, the way the characters are written, the way that everything's done is 100% Brian Hitch Ultimates, right? Which I don't know if we ever did Ultimates in our book clubs, but it's like, you know, 2000 around that time. But they basically, Brian Hitch and Mark Millar like reinvented everything, and now that's the Marvel Cinematic Universe is based on that. It's not based on Jack Kirby and Stanley. It's based on that. And I feel like this comic, it's like you said, it's the opposite of that, where Brian Hitch was doing everything widescreen to the point that you could take the Ultimates comic and just use it as a template and go, okay, here's scene 1, here's scene 2, or shot 1 or shot 2. Meanwhile, those guys don't even get invited to the premieres of these movies. Like Ed Brubaker for Winter Soldier, they didn't even let him come to the premiere. He had to sit like up in the cheap seats, you know? It feels like this comic is Tom King going, okay, I'm going to do a comic that, since I know I'm never going to make any money off of this, I might as well do it the complete opposite of a storyboard, the complete opposite of a movie. I'm going to make this so much like a comic book that no one could ever even adapt this, right? That's what I feel like it was. I'm not saying he thought that, but it definitely feels like this is more of a comic book than a template for a movie. That's what I felt.
Yeah.
It feels like it's like that moment in, like, I feel like he's doing to comics what Quentin Tarantino did in Pulp Fiction to movies. Like when you, like, I imagine that if you're making movies, you're told never to just put the camera in one place and have a character and just show like the character's face. But like there's that scene in Pulp Fiction where you just get Bruce Willis's face for like
Right. 5
6
minutes.
Like,
right.
yeah, like minutes on time. And while whatever his name is talking to him,
Marcellus Wallace, yeah.
Marcellus Wallace. And this is kind of the same thing, right? Like, I'm not going to give you anything active. I'm just going to like totally break down those conventions and like, I don't know, it'd be really interesting to see where, like, I'm sure you get it a lot in alternative comics, but I don't know whether you would get that much. I mean, I think that Hawkeye does it. I think,
Yeah, some mainstream comics do, but most don't. You're right.
I love it.
All right.
You want to go around one last time?
Guess we should. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I go around in circles here. Is Lucy still there? I want to hear if Lucy's still there. If she,
I was very patiently listening.
She was spying on us.
did you?
Yeah, I was.
Lucy, I had a question though. I know that you had a lot of difficulty with the beginning of the book, and I feel kind of bad about that.
Oh, don't feel bad.
Did you get beyond that with the book?
I like the last bit I read was like him telling his wife that like he doesn't feel like something's right with him and he didn't think he could fight this war. And I was like, this is way too much for me right now.
Mhm.
I do want to go back and read it later because this was a very interesting discussion and it made me like more hopeful that it was going to delve into topics that I didn't think it was going to delve into, because I thought it was going to focus very heavily on I mean, it does seem like it focuses a lot of depression, but it does, like, I was afraid it was going to focus a lot on family dynamics, and that was also something I was like, I don't think I can read something like that right now. But I feel like the way it handles depression is very nuanced, and I'm very excited to read about that, and also how it handles religion, which is kind of like you guys went into a lot of topics about like the nature of good and evil and God, and I was like, well, that's a nice surprise. So I'm totally excited to read this later. I just, when it's not, when I'm in a better space, I'll say, like, I just didn't expect it to begin with like a suicide attempt. And I'm like, I don't know if I can read this right now.
Yeah, it's a pretty rough beginning.
Yeah.
Sure.
She asked me what the book was about, and I said it's a parody of Stan Lee.
Mhm.
That was all I gave her.
You're no help at all, Keith.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Lucy. Thanks for sharing that.
I really enjoyed this discussion. I'm really glad I eavesdropped in. It was amazing. So, and it made me really excited to pick up this comic at a later time. For now, I'm gonna read something like more light or very abstract. Like I picked up a bunch of issues of Something is Killing the Children, and I think that's more my speed right now. Like not like very light, not heavy philosophical thoughts at all.
Cool.
Just smashing monsters in the woods.
Sometimes we just need that kind of thing, you know?
Exactly. But yeah, don't feel sorry at all. It's just I'm excited to read this when I'm in like a different headspace
Sure.
after coronavirus is over.
Yeah. By the way, there was so Tom King is now doing Rorschach, and
shit.
yeah, he included a cameo. He threw in Frank Miller, and it's like it's a very detailed. You have to know so much about Watchmen and Frank Miller and like the universe to get this cameo. Like that's how I learned about it. It was like it was an explanation for like, you know, the Watchmen universe and the Rorschach universe and Steve Ditko and all this stuff. And anyhow, there are a lot of comic book readers who really don't like Tom King. That's what I learned from the comics or comments in the on this article. I was like,
Really?
Well,
yeah.
Keith, don't go in the comments
I
section.
know, that was my
What's
mistake.
wrong with you?
Oh yeah, I heard someone call him a soy boy, but anyway.
Well,
Why?
it's just like
Tom King, who worked for the CIA,
It's a
the
Exactly.
famous soy boy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So and the fat couch potato is calling him that? Like
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
moving on. I hate people. Okay,
I
anyway.
mean, I don't want to call anybody an incel, but I think I just did.
Yeah.
Mm.
Didn't people not like him because they don't like this sort of like meta comic?
Yeah,
I don't-
exactly.
I
They
don't
don't
know.
like difficult comics.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
difficult
It's
to-
right up there with the feminist agenda being injected into their comics.
They want comics to just be comics and like nothing else. It was like,
Fisticuffs
what?
and fighting and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of comic writers where you would give them Rorschach and they would just like do it just totally wrong and completely
Well, they would lionize
misunderstand
him,
the
right?
character. Right.
Yeah.
And when I heard you say Tom King was doing it, I was like, okay, I would trust Tom King to write a Rorschach comic.
Mhm.
It's not. I don't want to get too far afield, but I'm not super into it yet. But there's like issues
Mm.
left, so but I'm along for the ride.
But yeah, it feels like some people just like, I don't want to think. So
Right.
No thoughts, head empty.
Alex,
I will give it.
what do you think?
I'll give it a 9. I'll definitely want to reread it again to see everything that I missed. But I really love the discussion. How about you, Patrick?
You know what? We're just gonna give in and indulge myself. I'm gonna bump it up to a 10 because
Wow.
this
Yay.
book is fabulous.
Yeah.
And who do you hand it off?
Lisa, let's hear
Okay.
from you.
I'll increase it to an 8, and though we didn't talk about it, but I liked how it addressed love past the infatuation stage, and like the getting through life
Just
with
getting
a
it through, yeah.
but in a loving, you know, and when you are in a loving interdependent relationship, which I felt that's what they had.
Cool.
Oh, I'll hand it off to Oliver.
I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think I am probably going to raise my score to an 8.75. I think we had a really good discussion. I feel like all the discussions we've been having lately have been some real bangers. So I've been digging it. So let's jump to have you gone yet, Jolie?
No, I have not.
Let's go to Jolie.
Thank you, Oliver. I will. I always enjoy the discussion. The questions were awesome. We covered them all, didn't we?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I give it an 8 with potentially room to grow. I'm gonna keep it an 8. I said it was better than I liked it better than Vision before, and now I'm gonna say that I liked it better than Vision for other reasons. The theme, the different themes about family and what it is to be human being one of them. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it an 8. While Jeff reads actual Vision, flips through it. Yeah. Who hasn't gone yet?
Jeffrey, Michael.
Oh, okay. Keith.
I gave it an 8 previously, and I'll raise it up to an 8.16 repeating.
I appreciate your precision, Keith.
Yeah, so
Get a real eye for detail.
yeah, it's we read it for the Vault book club, and you know, I remember for Mike Fritsch talking about when he introduced this book at last month's book club, they talked about it starting with the suicide, and I like so much happens in this book that I totally forgot that was
So did
how
I.
it started.
I totally forgot.
Yeah, and it was yeah, so it's just you know, it's such a weird mishmash because there's, you know, like I remember flipping around before like really getting into it, and you know, like reading the parts where it's very very comic booky, where it's like the wars between the two worlds and what's going on, and then like when I actually you know dug into it, it was like that was like the C plot. That was like so unimportant to what's happening. So you know, I did really like the analysis, you know, of like what a comic book I guess can be, you know. So, but yes, I think it asks a lot, but it's not like an impossibly dense text. So yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the discussion. And I think Michael.
So yeah, 8.5. Like I said, I think our discussion definitely elevates it, but I'd have to read it again to see, you know, everything. I appreciate Tom King, you know, soy boy #1, writing intelligent comics for people that want intelligent stories. So keep doing it, Tom. I'm on your side. And also, if I encourage everyone to read Final Crisis by Grant Morrison, because that is where you find out about the fifth world. Okay. And with that, I will pass it over to Mike Prime.
I'm going to finish up with, what did I give it last time? Do you recall? It was like an 8. 8. I'll go with a 9. Just this book is just, it's so appealing to so many different people. Fine people like yourselves. And for all different kinds of reasons. And who can fault a book for being able to be enjoyed for so many different reasons. So at 8, the artwork was great. The writing was fantastic. It was just a challenging book, but an enjoyable book. And Jeff, I think you're the last one.
I'm gonna give it an 8.5, and I'm going to bump it up. I think it's rising. It's probably a 9, and has the potential to go up to, like, this is one that I will put. I read it online. I will buy it. It's one that I want to go on the shelf. The artwork is right, like, it totally appeals to me. It has a sort of brushy quality that I always like. And like I'm super into Tom King and what he's doing. Like, I feel like he's super interested in comic as a form and telling stories that are specifically comic, like specific to comics, and that always fascinates me. So like I don't know about, I have to go back and reread Vision. I like the artwork in this better. I think it's really pretty amazing.
I agree.
And I feel like his stories are stories that I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stories where you can be like, oh, I know how you write this. You have a character, they go and do some stuff, right? This is a story where I'm like, how the fuck do you write this? And that,
right,
like, that blows me away. And I think for the same reason that probably lots of people hate it, because they're like, what is going on here? I don't even get it. Like, they're like, yeah, give it to me. I like the ambiguity that I just convinced myself to put up to 9.5.
Ooh, high praise.
So love it.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thank you, Mike, for introducing it to us.
Yeah, sure thing.
And thank you.
Very enjoyable. Well, I think that's it for this month. Next month, if I can read my schedule right here, is May 15th, The Spirit, 80th anniversary celebration by Will.
Woo!
Ooh.